What is up, guys? It is Marcus from Perspective Sports, and the NFL season is upon us. And in this video, we'll go division by division, and I'll show you the standings for each and why I feel it will play out as I predict. And we'll also take a look at the playoffs. There will be timestamps in the description or the comment section below if you want to skip to a specific part. And I may seem brief at times, but there's 8 divisions to go through, and that's why. And so without further ado, let's dive right into it with the AFC North. And yes, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers winning this division after a drama-plagued season last year. And the reason I believe the Steelers will win the division is because they're going back to the old Steeler way, and that's with defense. TJ Watt, Mark Barron, Devin Bush, who I think will have an excellent rookie season. They also added Steve Nelson, the cornerback from the Chiefs, who caught 4 interceptions, defended 15 passes, had 68 tackles, and 2 for loss to put across from Joe Hayden. I think the defense will be the identity of the Steelers this season, but on the offensive side, they still have Ben Roethlisberger, James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, and Vance McDonald. I believe that this would be more of addition by subtraction because they're subtracting 2 very toxic players from their locker room, and that's why I'm buying into the Steelers being successful this season. Next, I have the Cleveland Browns finishing with the same record as the Pittsburgh Steelers, but will finish second in the division. There is no question the Browns have a really good roster. Baker Mayfield's really good. Their running back stable is legit. The second best receiving core in the league behind Atlanta. Then you have the defense that has Myles Garrett, Morgan Burnett, Greedy Williams, Olivier Vernon. And the media has really gotten ahead of themselves when it comes to Cleveland. Yes, they're exciting. Yes, they have a lot of personality in that locker room. John Dorsey, the GM, he has a huge personality. Mix that in with a rookie head coach, Freddie Kitchens, things can go very left very fast. And when you look at their schedule, it's not easy. At Indianapolis, they have the Rams at home. They have at San Fran. They have Seattle at home. They have New England in late October. They're at Denver in November. They still have to play Baltimore and Pittsburgh twice. Their schedule is legit, and I think people really overlook how tough it is. Next, I have the Baltimore Ravens finishing up a lot lower than most people probably do. And as for the Baltimore Ravens, I'm not sold on Lamar Jackson or the defense anymore for that matter. The defense lost Zadarius Smith, C.J. Mosley, and Eric Weddle. The 3 of them accounted for 218 tackles, 10 sacks, 18 tackles for loss and a forced fumble. Their presence is hard to replace, and they tried to replace Weddle by bringing in Eric Thomas, who's coming off a serious leg injury. Shane Ray has underachieved since coming into the NFL, and Mark Ingram became excellent when he was paired with Alvin Kamara. I also saw an article that said the Ravens are planning to let Lamar Jackson run the ball and possibly break Cam Newton's record, and that's a recipe for disaster. And now that the NFL defensive coordinators have had a full offseason to dissect Lamar and plan for what they'll do when they play the Ravens, you're going to have to beat teams with Lamar Jackson's arm. And in 7 games, he only averaged 75.8 passing yards per game. The Ravens receiving corps isn't even much better than it was last year. I don't think an option/run heavy offense is going to work in today's NFL when you have a quarterback that can't air it out. And I don't even think the Ravens have the personnel to make it work. I don't see Mark Ingram being an option back. And I don't think the Ravens will be as good as most people think they will be. And now coming in last place is obviously the Cincinnati Bengals, who have a good defense per usual, but they'll be without A.J. Green, who has torn ligaments in his ankles. For how long he'll be out, we don't know. And the Bengals just aren't going to put up much of a challenge to anyone this season. Now let's stay in the North, but with the NFC in the division, looks like this. You have the Packers coming in first, Vikings second, Bears third, and Lions fourth. And I believe the Packers will reclaim the NFC North, but not without a fight from the Minnesota Vikings and the Chicago Bears. The Packers have had an eventful offseason for the first time in a long time. They brought in Matt LaFleur to be the head coach, and if you can get along with Aaron Rodgers, which I think the problems are clearly overblown for media purposes, the Packers will see a huge increase in time of possession, and the offense will be more precise, and they'll use more plays to set up bigger plays. And it could do wonders for this Packers offense that doesn't really have the most impressive receiving core when you take on Devontae Adams. As for the defense, they've gotten much better, adding Zadarius Smith, Adrian Amos, Preston Smith. They also added Rashawn Gary, who people have been raving about during training camp, Darnell Savage to play with Adrian Amos. This Packers defense is going to be able to get pressure on the quarterback, and that's something that hasn't been able to be said in a long time. Coming in second, we have the Minnesota Vikings, who took a major step back last season, but I think they'll recover this year. Kirk Cousins has a year under his belt in Minnesota. He's built chemistry with Stephon Diggs, Adam Thielen, Kyle Rudolph, and now Dalvin Cook will be back in the mix with Alexander Madison, who I think will have an excellent rookie season. The Vikings offense will be a force to be reckoned with. On their defense, they retained Anthony Barr. They still have Eric Kendricks, Harrison Smith, Everson Griffin, Xavier Rhodes. The Minnesota Vikings are still one of the more complete teams in the NFL, and now that the offense has a year to mesh together, I think they'll be a lot better. And then we have the Chicago Bears, who I believe will take a Minnesota-like step back this season. Last year, they had the advantage of an explosive defense playing in a banged-up division with a favorable schedule. Now they're playing a first-place schedule. The Packers are improved. The Vikings are healthy. They'll have to play the Saints, Chargers, Eagles, and Rams in a 5-week span. That's 4 very tough, very complete teams in a 5-week span. And there's no bye week in between that either. It's just another game in there. They lost Bryce Callahan, traded Josh Howard, lost Adrian Amos. They didn't do a great job of replacing them. The Bears' offense isn't on the level of a Minnesota or a Green Bay. They'll still have a winning season, but it won't be good enough to win the division. And finally, we have the Detroit Lions, who have a decent roster but play in a division with the Minnesota Vikings, Green Bay Packers, and Chicago Bears. The Lions' D-line will be the strength of the team, especially since signing Mike Daniels, but the offense is average, and the back end of the defense, with exception of Darius Slay, is below average. And let's make our way over to the AFC East, where the New England Patriots will win this division for the 16th time in 17 years. And the Patriots have the best roster, best coach, and quarterback in the division by 1.5 miles. They'll coast through this division. The Patriots added Michael Bennett to the D-line to replace Trey Flowers. They still have one of the best secondaries in the NFL with Chung, both McCourties, and Gilmore. Tom Brady has a young, fast, big receiver in N'Keal Harry, who people have been raving about through training camp. And anyone who thinks the Patriots are going to regress is wrong. I believe the Patriots will continue to roll on. Coming in second, we have the Buffalo Bills, who have a great defense. On the offensive side, Josh Allen now has John Brown, Cole Beasley, and Tyler Kroft as new weapons, and I think he'll take strides in the right direction. I'm not sure how the Bills' run game will be. I think it will be one of the things holding them back this season, but I think Josh Allen will have his coming out party this year. Then in third, we have the New York Jets, coming at 6-10. Despite adding Le'Veon Bell, C.J. Mosley, and re-signing Henry Anderson, the Jets don't have much of a receiving core outside of Robbie Anderson. I feel they overpaid for Jamison Crowder. I have concerns about the O-line. There's still some gaps on the defense, and there's no question that the Jets are much improved, and I think over the next few seasons they'll be able to compete with New England as Sam Darnold grows into a high-level quarterback. Finally, we have the Miami Dolphins, who I think will go 5-11, but we'll see Josh Rosen coming after a few weeks of Ryan Fitzpatrick and show that he's a really good quarterback. I still stand by Josh Rosen. I think he has the potential to be an elite quarterback. But as far as the roster, there's not much of anything there. Minka Fitzpatrick, Xavier Howard, Devontae Parker. The O-line is still a concern, which we saw Josh struggle with the subpar O-line of Arizona last year. And to make it worse, the Dolphins just fired their offensive line coach. But let's make our way over to the NFC East. In this division, we'll see the Cowboys and Eagles fighting tooth and nail for this division, as both teams have fairly complete rosters. But I like the Eagles a little better. They have a better stable of running backs, better quarterback, and a better secondary than Dallas. Dallas has their offensive line, but the Eagles are pretty much on the same level. And if the Eagles can get a full year out of Carson Wentz, I think they'll be able to put together another MVP-like season with weapons like Deshaun Jackson, Jordan Howard, Alshon Jeffrey, Zach Ertz, Nelson Aguilar, and that's why I give them the edge over Dallas. But Dallas is also dealing with their own set of problems with Ezekiel Elliott, who wants to cut in line and get his contract extension now. And if he's willing to sit out a couple of games, that could be the difference between winning the division and not. As for the Redskins, I have them coming in third. I think they'll finish 7-9. Dwayne Haskins will come along well and get better throughout the season. The Redskins have a receiving core that's a bit of a concern of mine, and it'll also hold back Dwayne Haskins. The Redskins have one of the best D-lines in the NFL, and if they can stay healthy, they'll be able to get pressure on the quarterback, which will put the Redskins in position to win some of the games they probably shouldn't be in. And coming in last, we have the New York Giants, who are between a rock and a hard place. The Giants' receiving core is depleted. The defense is aging. The Giants will struggle to get any sort of momentum throughout the season. They'll be fighting the decision to let Eli play or do the right thing and let the young guy Daniel Jones get some valuable playing time. And with all that being said, Saquon Barkley will still have a monster year stat-wise. Now let's fly south to the AFC South. That'll see the Colts coming in first place, Texans second, Titans third, and Jaguars fourth. And I need to say this, because don't let the records fool you. I believe the Colts are a very good football team, but they have a brutal schedule at the Chargers, at the Saints, at the Chiefs, at the Steelers. They'll play the Falcons at home, the Texans twice, and Denver will be good this year. The Colts have a tough schedule with a lot of big games, and coming out 10-6 should be considered a success. I think Andrew Luck will play phenomenal. I think the offensive line will do its job. Marlon Mack will look good. The Colts receiving core will be good. The defense will be much improved. But that schedule, that schedule is something else. In the same concept with the Texans, I don't think they're as good as the Colts, but I think this team will be in the hunt for the playoffs. But they have an almost identical schedule as the Colts. I know they're in the same division. They play the same teams except for two. But they're at the Chargers, at the Saints, at the Chiefs, with the Falcons and Broncos at home. 9-7 should be considered a success for the Texans as well. As for the Titans and Jaguars, I think their quarterback play will hold their defenses back this year. Marcus Mariota isn't a long-term solution at quarterback, in my opinion. I'll go out on a limb and say Ryan Tannehill will start in 4 or more games this season. And as for the Jaguars, paying Nick Foles $88 million over 4 years with $50.1 guaranteed was pure, unadulterated desperation. They know their elite defense is getting older and their contracts are about to expire, meaning they'll have to pay some and let a lot go. And would just look out 2 years with Jalen Ramsey, Marcel Darius, Calais Campbell will all be free agents. This was pure desperation on the Jaguars' part. And when you look at Nick Foles' numbers outside of Philadelphia, he's just not the same guy. And so I don't think the Jaguars will be in much of a position to win many games this year, despite the great defense. Also, Leonard Fournette, how will he look this year? We don't know. How will the receiving corps look? We don't know. There's a lot of question marks with this Jaguars offense. And now let's move on to the NFC South that will see the Falcons be the biggest surprise in the NFL this year. They're coming off a disappointing 7-9 season, mainly due to the immense amount of injuries this team had. A healthy Falcons team is a dangerous Falcons team. Matt Ryan, yes, who is elite, having Julio Jones, Mohamed Sanu, Calvin Ridley, Devontae Freed, and Austin Hooper. We all know that offense is legit, but the defense is still fast and it's still aggressive. Grady Jarrett, Vic Beasley, Deion Jones, Desmond Trufant, Keanu Neal, Ricardo Allen. The defense has playmakers all over the field. They also added Adrian Claiborne, and then they added James Carpenter to beef up the offensive line. You can see that they do have a tie with the Falcons the first time they meet in Week 10, and I have them winning their Week 13 matchup against the Saints. And the Saints will be taking the step back this year, coming from 13-3 to 10-5-1, as I see the division being more competitive. The Falcons are healthy, and the Panthers are improved, and a team that I think will be much better on the road this year because the Panthers were 2-6 last year on the road. The Saints retained pretty much everybody on their roster, minus Mark Ingram, who they replaced with Latavius Murray, who's a solid back. They also replaced Ben Watson with Jared Cook. That's an upgrade in my opinion. The Saints will still be very competitive and a Super Bowl contender. And as far as the Panthers, they've gotten much better. Signing Gerald McCoy, Matt Paradis, Chris Hogan, Bruce Irving. They had an excellent draft getting Greg Little and Brian Burns. This Panthers defense will be able to get more pressure on the quarterback this season, as the Panthers were 27th in sacks last season. The Panthers' offense is also much improved, which means the playbook will be more open, and they won't be playing from behind so often. So Coach Rivera will allow Cam Newton to be himself, which will add another dimension to the offense. And then we have the Buccaneers, who don't have much of anything. Jameis Winston isn't a franchise quarterback on or off the field. Their additions aren't needle movers. I did like their draft. They were focusing on defense, but that's not going to change much of anything. I'm a huge fan of Coach Arians, but his faith in Jameis Winston, who has actually gotten progressively worse over his career, is scary and will keep this team back from going forward. And now let's fly out west to the AFC West, where we're going to see the Chargers win the division. And this division will be the most competitive by far. This has the Chargers, Chiefs, and Broncos who will be fighting late into the season for the division, and it will end in a Week 17 thriller as the Chargers travel to Kansas City to stun Patrick Mahomes in the Chiefs to win the division. I am a firm believer in the Chargers, and I'm a firm believer that they have the best roster in the NFL with or without Melvin Gordon. The Chargers have a favorable schedule, playing teams like Green Bay, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, Texans, Vikings, all at home. They won't have to travel out there in cold weather and play those games. They won't have to go across the country in a different time zone. All those teams will be coming to LA to play. As far as the Chiefs, they have a very good team. They added Frank Clark, Tyrann Mathieu, Darren Lee, boosting their defense. That was a huge weak spot last season. Patrick Mahomes will be very good, but now the defensive coordinators have a year's worth of tape on him. They'll be able to contain him a little better. He won't be able to run roughshod all over the league again. I think he'll still be a very, very good quarterback, but just not 50 touchdowns good. And as far as the Denver Broncos, this team will be a lot better than people expected. People forget that Joe Flacco is a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP. Give all the credit to that defense if you want to. It was a great defense, but the offense was still 10th in the league in scoring. And over the last few years, the Ravens didn't do Joe Flacco not a single favor, giving him a bad O-line, no receivers, no run game. And I'm not here saying Joe Flacco is elite and he's just phenomenal, revolutionary talent. But if you give Joe Flacco quality players, he will make your team competitive. And guess what Denver has? An elite defense. They have a receiving core. They have Phillip Lindsay at running back. They have stuff that Baltimore did not give him in his final years there. And then we have the Raiders, who are nothing more than noise. Derek Carr is a good quarterback who can win games, but your Pro Bowl receiver you just traded for is looking for every reason not to play football. The coach is from a different era. You lost your two best offensive linemen in Donald Penn and Calicio Stimole. And this team is going to underachieve. And on a positive note, the Raiders did have a very good draft class like Josh Jacobs, Cleveland Farrell, Jonathan Abrams, and Trayvon Mullen. But this team just isn't what it's all hyped up to be. And finally, we have the NFC West that will see the Rams dominated. This is a much improved division, though, as the 49ers will get their franchise quarterback and Jimmy Garoppolo back in action. I think Jimmy and Coach Shanahan's system will fit perfectly. They also had a year to study and see it done with Nick Mullins. But as far as the Rams, they're a great team. They'll continue to be a great team. They added Eric Weddle and Clay Matthews to their roster. Their draft wasn't all that impressive in my opinion, but they are stacked from top to bottom. The Rams' schedule also isn't too hard. The tough games like Chicago and New Orleans, they're at home. Yes, they have to play Dallas and Atlanta on the road, but the overall schedule is favorable. And then you have the Seahawks that lost a lot this offseason. Eric Thomas, Frank Clark. They added Ziggy Ansah. They drafted DK Metcalf and Gary Jennings and edge rusher LJ Culliver. I think the Seahawks will be competitive because of Russell Wilson. And that's pretty much it. He put this team on his back and carried them to the playoffs last season. And I think he'll try to do the same thing this year. And as for the Cardinals, Josh Rosen wasn't the problem. And Kyler won't be either. But they're both in the same situation. Drafted high by the Cardinals, rookie NFL head coach, questionable O-line, no run game. The Cardinals were ranked dead last in running last season, and they're in a tough division. I think Kyler Murray will have a decent rookie season, but he will struggle to find any sort of rhythm because of how bad this Cardinals team is. And that will round out the divisions, and let's take a look at the playoffs. Coming in the AFC, we have the Chargers, the number 1 seed at 11-5. The Patriots, the number 2 seed at 10-6. The Colts, the 3 seed at 10-6. The Steelers, the 4 seed at 9-7. The Chiefs, the 5 seed at 10-6, and the Texans rounding out the playoffs at 9-7. In the NFC, we have the Rams coming in first at 12-4. The Eagles coming in second at 11-5. The Packers coming in third at 11-5. The Falcons coming in fourth at 10-5-1. The Saints coming in fifth at 10-5-1, and the Vikings rounding out the playoffs at 10-6. And let's move on to Wild Card Weekend. That will see the Colts defeat the Texans, the Chiefs defeat the Steelers on the road, the Vikings fall to the Packers, and the Falcons fall to the Saints at home. And in the divisionals, we'll see the Chargers knock out the Chiefs, the Patriots defeat the Colts, the Rams defeat the Saints, and the Packers stun the Eagles. And then in the conference championship, we'll have the Chargers defeat the Patriots, and the Rams defeat the Packers. And in the Super Bowl, we have Phillip Rivers defeating Jared Goff to win his first Super Bowl. There you have it. I have the Los Angeles Chargers winning the Super Bowl this season over the Los Angeles Rams in a battle of LA. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. I'll see you there.